I'm Jim Murphy, and welcome to another training session of the instrumentation in the Yale School of Medicine CCMI X-Ray Core Instrumentation Lab. Today we'll be looking at the RockImager 1000 by Formulatrix. The imager provides you with an ability to, after you set up your crystallization experiments, you can automatically image them over the course of the next few weeks, either at daily intervals or 12-hour intervals, or whatever you like, and it's extremely versatile. Let me go through the components that we have here. This is the imager itself. It's also a incubator, so it is set at 20 degrees C all the time. I'm going to open the imager to show you the components inside. This here is the load port hotel, where if we open that, we can put our experimental plates in here, and the robotic hands will bring the plate into the system for imaging. So if I open the main door, the first thing we can see is that there's stacks of plates in there. Those are the storage hotels. This particular one can hold up to 1,000 plates. And each plate has a barcode, so the robotic arm and the barcode reader, which is located in the center, is able to locate a particular experiment and move it appropriately. This part here, this is the actual imaging stage. So there's a plate on the stage right now. There's a visible microscope as well as a UV microscope, and robotics that move and center the plate. Down here is the fluorescent module with the door that brings the plates into the fluorescent part of it. And this allows imaging of your experiments. Okay, so this is the workstation for the imager. There's 2 dedicated computers for the imager. This computer runs a program called RockImager, which is the control software for the robotics. The second computer runs software called RockMaker, which is the user interface for designing experiments. The 3 monitors are set up such that this one is for RockImager and these 2 are for RockMaker. This allows you to look at your crystallization experiments and move them into PowerPoint or another appropriate program for your records, or to create a presentation on crystallization conditions. RockMaker is quite versatile, or the RockImager is quite versatile. It can handle standard hanging drop experiments, sitting drop experiments. It can also handle LCP plates for doing integral membrane proteins and doing fluorescent imaging for an experiment called FRAP. Additionally, it can handle pretty much any plate that's in SBS format, which is the dimensions of the rectangle of the plate. So for example, it can handle this 15-well QIAGEN plate where you'd set up 3 hanging drops per well. It can also handle smaller 24-well plates where you would set up the drops by hand and then load them in the imager. The key is each plate has to be of this particular size, and there needs to be a plate definition made in the software, and we'll produce a barcode for each one. The barcode reader is here, and after you create an experiment, we'll make a barcode so we can keep track of that particular plate. The imager is extremely useful. Once you set up your experiment, it will take initial images at time 0, and then we'll continue to image based on the schedule you give it. Most people give it a default schedule with a Fibonacci sequence of 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, etc. days, and you can modify that. And you can also use it manually to look at regions of interest and potential crystallization hits. Okay, in this section, we will demonstrate how to set up a sitting drop experiment to be imaged in the RockImager 1000. So today we're going to look at using a Corning 3553 standard sitting drop plate and set up 3 drops per well. And we'll have used the screen, Crystal Screen HT from Hampton. Basically what we'll do is on the left computer, start the program RockImager. So basically under projects, it's listed by PI for the most part. You'll go and find your folder where you want to set up your experiment. If you right-click on the folder, you can make a new project, which will create a blue folder. That way you can organize your projects. Within a project, you'll set up an experiment. Typically, one experiment represents one plate. There are special cases where one experiment can represent a variety of plates. And that's typically if most of the plates are the same. So let's set up a new experiment for our 3553 plate here. So on the project, we'll go to New Experiment. We'll give it a name. I usually put the date in the name and the screen. And then perhaps your protein, let's just call it R5. Okay. So then in this tab here, this is going to be our experimental setup. So the first thing you want to do is choose the plate type. That's the single most important thing. That has to be correct. So from the drop-down menu here, should show all the different plate types. In this case, we have a new definition for 3553 here. If your plate definition is not in that list, let me know. We can make a new plate definition and add it to that. Or if you notice your plates aren't imaging properly, we can repair that. You want to make sure that the owner is listed as you, so you have access to it. If you and another person are collaborating, I can set up access so you can look at each other's experiments. And then you want to set up the imaging schedule. So this is the default setup, where you're imaging in Imager Default, which is basic visible imaging. Under certain experimental conditions, you can, there's other imaging possibilities. Have the condenser on, you can do cross-polarization, fluorescent imaging, and a couple of UVs. Typically, we don't UV image the entire plate every time. It takes quite a while. You want to image individual wells with UV. Then the timing sequence here, the default is this Fibonacci nightly. So by nightly, it'll take an image right at 0 days, 0 hours, basically as soon as the plate goes in the machine. This is useful to see if there's a particle or something there that was there when you set up the tray, or perhaps a salt crystal that formed quickly, to eliminate that as a possibility if you see that appear in day 3 or so. And you'll still see it at day 0. The nightly, it typically will image about 12 hours after the setup. That way it's doing most of the scheduled imaging at night when no one's using the system. And the Fibonacci sequence is just the sequence of days here. You can modify this and customize it and add different amounts. So I just added one at 6 hours. That's useful. If you realize your crystals are growing quite quickly, you can add earlier time frames, and you can also add later ones. If you start noticing something at 21 days, you can add 25, 30, etc. Once you have the imaging schedule and the plate definition correct, then we're going to go over to this Canvas tab here. Basically, this is going to create a version of your plate within the computer. So we told it was a 3553 plate, so it's a 96 wall plate with 3 drop positions here. So there's 2 ways to set up the well solution here. Since in this particular case, we're using the Crystal Screen HT by Hampton. Most of the commercially available screens are within the software. So you'll see that in this folder here, Screens. Navigate down to the screen you're using. So here it is, Crystal Screen HT. And simply drag that over into the well area here. That should populate the well with the components. And this is useful later. If you get a hit, you can simply look and see what the recipe is for that. If you look over here, this is your volume of the well. So 50 microliters is the standard. If that's different, you can adjust it. And when you update it, the recipes should change as well, accordingly. So next step is you want to get your protein into the drops here. All right, pause that. Well, you can just snip this out. Hold on a second. Yeah, pause it for a second, but I think we can pick back up where we were.
Yeah, let's put it up.
Fuck, do I delete this layer? Oh. Okay, I see what I did. As soon as I closed that, it freaked out. So we picked up with, now we have to add a protein to the layer. Okay. So that will start in about 2 seconds here. So we'll go back to your project file here, and now we're going to add a protein. So right-click, New Protein Formulation, and you want to put in the name of the protein, and I typically put in the concentration, especially, and this is useful if you're working with several different proteins. So in this experiment, we set up 3 drops. And it gives you a tab for each protein so you can put in notes and things here. That being said, the software is designed to be, you can use that as your complete laboratory notebook in digital form and record all your information about the experiment within the software and have a permanent record of it rather than using a book. You can also use the book as long as you know your plate numbers and the names of your folders. So let's go back to the experiment we're setting up. So to set up each of the drops, basically grab the protein, grab the protein and drop it off in drop 1. And what that'll do is set up a default drop of 0.5 microliters to 0.5 microliters. And you can change that. So let's say you would do a 0.5 to 0.25. That'll update it there. So we'll do that for all 3 drops. Now drops 1, 2, and 3 in this software are the same as the ones in the NT8 software. The Mosquito refers to them as drops 2, 3, 4. So once you have your drops set up, we'll save it. Now if you only use 1 or 2 of the drops, when you set up the tray, just leave the other ones blank so you're not taking pictures of empty wells. So go back to experiment, push save. At that point, if everything goes well, this little tab should pop up and give you the plate number. So in our case, this is plate 5849. That's the one number that you want to write down and remember to keep track of your plate. If there's an issue, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what plate number was it? At this point, you can right-click on that and print the barcode. And once the barcode's printed, then we can work with the imager. All right, so once the barcode is printed out, you want to carefully take the barcode off of the barcode printer and leave this little extra strip behind. We don't need that. Then take the barcode and make sure when you put it on that the barcode itself is flat. That's what it's reading. And you'll place it at the 12 end of the plate. And have it on nice and flat. If you have the plates with the cut corners, you want to make sure that the barcode is on the flat edge. At that point, you'll carefully take your plate or plates and bring them over to the load port hotel. You can put up to 6 plates in at once. So when you open the door, load port hotel should come out towards you. If it doesn't, close the door, wait a few seconds and open it again, and it should come out towards you. You want to take it and barcode in, fit it into one of the 6 slots, it doesn't matter which one, and it should fit snugly right in there. Then close the door and lock it. Then we're going to use the computer that runs RockImager software. So first step is you'll go to this tab that says Load Port and Scan Load Port. So at that point, the barcode reader should come down and identify what's in the load port. Okay, so if it'll find the plate, you just want to confirm that that's the correct plate and that it read it. If the text is in red, there's a problem with it. The most typical problem is that you have 2 barcodes that are the same. You can't have that. Next thing you want to do is go up to Load Port and Store Contents. What that's going to do is the robot is going to come down to the Load Port Hotel, pick up the plate, and bring it into storage. Okay. So if we go to the Scheduling tab, we'll see that this particular plate is next in the schedule. And the reason for that is we set it to image at 0 days, 0 hours, so that's now. So it's going to take the first plate and begin to image it. Okay, so we see the plate at the top of the Scheduler tab, and if now we can watch the plate get imaged at the beginning. So if we go over to the Imager tab here, it'll give a live image of the current imaging. And this imager control should be set to visible UV. If you look carefully down here in green text, it will tell you what it's currently doing. It'll align the plate and then take images of the 3 drops as we instructed it to do. Okay, so here's well A1, drop 1, 2, 3. It's a confocal microscope, so it takes a series of images, about 20 of them, in the Z direction, and then it will assemble those into a single image using the images that it thinks are in focus, and compresses into one image that we can view in RockImager. So we're going to let this plate image and then view it in the RockImager software to see what we get. Okay, in this segment, we've set up a 96 well experiment on hanging drop with a single drop per well using the Formulatrix MTA, using the commercially available screen from Hampton Research. And I'm going to show you how to set up RockImager to have it automatically image. So we go to our folder and make a new experiment. Hanging drop, screen 1. So now we'll go over to the experiment tab. So first is the plate type. The default is 96 well Baby Falcon 1 drop. That's the default and for all the hanging drops. Most of the plates are pretty similar, and with the drop location function, it should work for that. If you're using a very different plate, you'll have to make a new definition for it. But that works for the hanging drops. We'll set up our imaging schedule. Basically, we'll do visible again. With the imaging default schedule, where we image at 0 days, 0 hours, and then the Fibonacci nightly sequence here. Then we'll go down to our canvas tab. And again, we have a representation of the plate in the computer. So our 96 well tray with a single drop in each well. So we can take the commercially available screen, drag it into the wells, and it'll populate the well and give us the recipe for each well. Now, if you're not using a commercial screen and you made your own optimized screen or any other custom screen that you have, there's an additional way to make a new experiment. So, new experiment. So, let's say that was a grid screen, ground condition detail. And you have the conditions of your 96 wells in your notebook. At that point, it's easy enough just to make sure the plate definition is correct, your scheduling is correct. You go to the canvas. Now, rather than putting the screen or all the individual components in, you'll just fill each well with water. So you would right click over A1, choose layer tool, grid layer. That makes this little crosshair. Highlight the entire plate, or part of the plate if you already used part of the plate in your setup. And that allows you to fill the well solutions without using the commercial screen option. So let's go back to the commercial screen. Here. And again, just like the sitting drop, we take our protein, drag it up to drop 1, and that'll populate all the drops with 0.5 plus 0.5 microliter drop, and you can adjust that. At that point, we'll go back to the experiment tab, make sure our scheduling is correct, and save it. You have to save it before it allows you to put a barcode. You can see here, the little tab popped out again. Now this is plate 5850. I'm going to click barcode. And at that point, we'll get the plate ready to go into the image. Okay, so we've just printed a barcode for our hang and drop inspector. We'll go over to the barcode reader. Again, carefully remove the barcode, leaving that the extra tab behind. And you want to take the barcode and place it on the 12 end of the plate. Place neatly and have the barcode flat. Carefully bring your plate over to the Loadport Hotel door. Open the door. The Loadport Hotel should come out towards you. Barcode in. Place it in one of the 6 positions, and it should fit in there snugly. Doesn't matter which position you put it in, and you can put it up to 6 plates at a time. Close the door, turn the lock. So we'll go over to the computer on the right that runs the imager. Go up to load port, scan load port. Right now it's looking at a plate that was in there, it's not on there. Identify that that other plate is no longer in there, and the plate I just put in is. So then we go to load port, store contents. So it's going to come down with the robotic arm, pick up the plate, and move it to storage. Since it's an automatic mode, it will begin imaging that plate right away because we asked them to image at 0 to 0 hours. And that should start. Okay, once the robot has taken the plate from the Loadport Hotel and brought it into storage, since we told it to image it at time 0, if we go over to the scheduling tab, we'll see our plate is at the top of the schedule here. To do visible imaging, and it's imaging now. So since it's a hanging drop plate, it does a drop location step, where if we go to the imager tab, and then the lower tab here that says drop location, we can watch this. And basically what it does is it goes well by well, and it takes an overview image of the entire well, and looks at the different contrasts and tries to identify where your drop is. Because of the nature of the experiment and the variation in the robots, your drop may or may not always be in the same exact position. So it uses an algorithm to estimate where your drop is, and then once it identifies where the drop is, it will go back and take a high-resolution picture of only this region. That way we get a better picture, and we're not taking high-resolution pictures of noise out here. We're only getting a picture of the drop. And once that's done, it'll go back through and image that particular area and save it. Okay, so in the hang drop experiment, initially at time 0, the imager will take an overview picture of the drop and then do an automatic drop location. Then it will take a high-resolution picture of where it thinks the drop is based on that drop location algorithm. What you want to do soon after that, preferably the same day or the next day, is go in and manually inspect and adjust the automatic drop location. So you'll find your plate, and this is an example I'm using here. This is our experimental setup. So then if we go to the Canvas tab and make sure we're on Composite View in the Navigator here, it'll show you the time 0 imaging here. And if we go to Overview, it's going to show an overview of the wells. So now you want to go through and inspect and manually adjust the automatic drop location. So start with A1. You can see here that's where it's decided the drop is. And if we go to the drop imaging at time 0, you can see it took a picture of that drop. So back to the overview. So normally what you do is just use the right arrow, go through the plate, manually inspect them. If it draws a blue box, that's possible second drop or another imaging interesting spot to image. So go along. It's usually pretty good. Occasionally it'll make a mistake. For example, here in well A8, it's decided that the drop is here for some reason, so basically it's just going to image noise. What you want to do then is right-click, go into drop location mode, and now you'll get a crosshair, and you can draw a box around the drop. So, and you want to be looking at the red box in this case. So highlight where the drop actually is, then right-click and lock the drop location. What that'll do is reset the position of the drop here so that in subsequent images you'll get a picture of this. Whereas picture of here, it's simply going to take a picture of nothing, which is useless. So that's that. Then you continue going through the plate, and you're still in, it should stay in drop location mode as long as you stay in the canvas view. There, lock drop location. That's, you can edit that one. And you can go through the whole plate pretty quickly. Like I say, I suggest you do that the first day so your subsequent images are correct. Okay, in this segment, we're going to learn how to use the RockImager 1000 to image a LCP plate, which is for looking at crystallizing membrane proteins in a lipidic cubic phase. Here's our plate that was set up on the Formulatrix NT8. First thing you want to do is take the glass plate and take a black Sharpie and mark the edge at the 12 end of the plate. That allows the barcode reader to find it a little bit better. Then we go into RockImager, and we'll set up a new experiment. So we'll just call that. Okay. So then in plate type, we'll choose LCP plate. There's a few other versions of that down here depending on the manufacturer of the plate. This is the standard one. So we're going to change the imaging schedule significantly. Since we're not going to image it in visible, we're only going to image it in fluorescent using the FRAP high throughput experiment. So right click and customize, unclick all of them, and then we want to delete each row. After the first one, you can use the keyboard. And I typically like to set 2 imaging schedules, one immediately and one an hour later to do the same experiment, which is the FRAP high throughput experiment, using the default settings for that. And the reason for the 0 hours and the 1 hour is that when it bleaches a spot, it does it at a random position, and occasionally you may get a position that's not optimal. So that gives you a second chance. Plus on positive hits, that gives you confirmation. So then we want to go to the Canvas tab. Now typically we're not using a commercial screen. We have a recipe that we've created, and it's in our notebook. So in that case, we'll just fill up the wells with the default, basically water, which is a blank. And then we need to pull some protein into the drop. Here. So that sets our drop up within the computer. So we go back to experiment, save the experiment. The little tab will come up here, tell us it's plate 5852. And then we can print the barcode. So once the barcode is printed, I'm going to take it off the barcode reader carefully, leaving behind that extra piece that we don't need. Place that on top of the glass. At the 12 end, and make sure none of the barcode sticker is hanging off the edge of the glass. What you'll do then is carefully open the load port hotel door, wait for the load port to come out, and place the plate in one of the slots and shut the door. So then in the Imager software, we'll go to load port, scan load port. We'll see our plate came up here. We'll then go to store contents. And it will put the temporarily put the plate up into storage, and then bring it to the fluorescent imager to image it at time 0. So now if we look at the scheduling plate, that should come up as the next one in the schedule. So if we're in automatic mode, it should go and image that immediately. Now the fluorescent imaging is different than the visible imaging, as you have to adjust the exposure time for each experiment. And that's based on your protein concentration and your degree of fluorescent labeling. And it's empirically is the only way to do that. There is a way to store your settings, and over in RockImager you can have multiple FRAP methods set up. But for now, we're just going to do it manually. Okay, so if we look in the imaging tab, you'll see ours is up here in the FRAP imaging mode. So if we go over to the Imager tab, and then over here to Imager Control, we want to look at the FRAP unit. So again, first it goes through and does a drop location for each well. The drop location in fluorescent is much more efficient than in visible. As you can see here from the contrast, it's very easy to find the drop. Okay. So as it finishes the drop location for that plate, we're going to want to switch over to live image. And now for each well where the drop was, it's going to take an image in visible and then fluorescent. So what we want to do is adjust the fluorescent imaging for each of these wells. The way we do that is go up to File, FRAP Configuration. Now it's going to warn you that it wants to go into manual mode, so continue yes. Move the window out of the way, and then go into imaging here. And what we're looking at here is imaging options of fluoro light. Mostly we're going to change this exposure amount. In rare cases we'll change the gain, but mostly the exposure. So we can see now it's overexposed at 800 milliseconds. So we're going to try a little less, apply. And since this is just the initial imaging where we try to get the fluorescent correct, it's not going to affect the experiment. So maybe a little less than that. So the rule of thumb is that you want the drop to sort of look like this, where it sort of looks like a full moon at night is a good way to put it. So here, so you get a good contrast between what's fluorescent and what's not. Once you're happy with your exposure time, you'll hit OK, and then make sure the scheduling is on automatic mode so that all your plates get imaged. And then it'll go in and do the FRAP experiment. Okay, so to retrieve your plates from the imager, when either you have crystals you want to harvest, or if your plates experiments are too old, you want to remove them, especially if they're too old, because they'll be taking up space, and also over time the seal dries up and that can jam the robot. So under the Plates tab here, you'll go to the Search sub-tab and find your plate. Again, you can search by your name or the plate number. And the plates for that search will come up. So if you just want to remove one plate, highlight it, move plate to Load Port Hotel, and the robot will come pick it up and bring it to the Load Port Hotel. If you want to do multiple plates, you can do up to 6 at a time. Either use Control or Shift to highlight the ones you want to remove and bring those to the Load Port Hotel. So the robot should bring it to the Load Port Hotel. Once you see it in there, open the door. The hotel should come out. Carefully remove it. Close the door. And then the last thing you want to do before you leave is go up to Load Port here and scan Load Port. Once the robot and the software realize that that plate is no longer in the system, it'll keep it in memory, but it won't be looking for it. All right, so in this section, we're going to look at some of the results from some test plates and see how they appear in RockImager. So in this example, it's a hanging drop plate with one drop in each well, and we use the default imaging schedule. So what you want to do when that's done, right now we're on the Experiment tab. You'll have your experiment highlighted here. And make sure we're on the composite view in the navigator and not the thumbnail view. And that'll show you each of the times post setup as well as each of the types of imaging. So we have the overview, then the drop with imager defaults, and then the drop with some UV imaging. So if we're on overview and we go to canvas, we can see a picture of each well. And if we click on the wells, as you remember, it did automatic drop location to choose where the drop was in each well, and then went on to do imaging. So with the time course here, you can look at the drops. It's 0, and they're pretty much blank. If we go to 1 day, 12 hours, we can see that we're getting some crystals to grow. So I'll pick one as an example here, A2. Okay. So in this drop, there's a few crystals that grew. In this case, this is the extended focus. So as I mentioned, it takes a variety of images throughout the Z direction, and you can scroll through those using the F12 and F11 keys. So if I hit F12, now we're on focus level 1, and it's a little bit out of focus because that's the top part of the drop. And we can go through the drop all the way down to focus 22 in this case. And you can see, since the drop's three-dimensional, some of the crystals are more in focus at this range, whereas these other ones are in focus up higher. That'll allow you to take pictures of different parts of the drops. You can also zoom in by scrolling. And center the drop anywhere you want. And then you can save the image here to the desktop or whatever, and that'll save what's on the screen. So now if we look at the same well in UV, we zoom out. So again, I'll zoom in a little bit, see what we got. And clearly these are glowing in UV due to the intrinsic tryptophan fluorescence of the protein. Also, we can go from the extended focus down through and find the slice that looks really nice, and zoom in and take a better picture. So you can adjust the intensity levels in tools here in this image tuning. This is much more valuable for UV than it is for visible. So we can just look at this histogram here. And adjust it as such to make a better image. So we'll go back to the canvas, and we can see UV imaging across the entire plate. So the big things here are the histogram, the ability to leave the extended focus and look at the individual layers. So that's one example. Another example of the time course. In this plate here. So this is another plate where we did the basic imaging schedule, did the overview at the beginning, and then the individual drops, and then we did some UV imaging towards the end. One thing I'll point out here is that for each well, let's go with the later time, there's a scoring function that you can use if you like. Or if you hit score view on canvas, so that's not a good example. Image view. Under tool, scores. Under scores, you can use the keyboard and keep track of what you have here. So, for example, you can call this granular precipitant. Looks like some phase separation there. More phase separation, etc. Then if you go back to canvas and look at the score view, it'll give you indication. And if you complete the whole plate, you can start to see patterns. One of the more interesting features is the interesting button. Whereas if we go to, I believe it's well G7. Okay. We're starting to see a crystal come up at 1 day, 12 hours here. So if I use the I key, that will label that drop as interesting and go to the next drop. If we go back, now it's going to have a little eye up here that it indicates that that's an interesting drop. Once you score a whole plate, the ones that are marked as interesting are flagged such that we can do a particular experiment with those, which I'll get to in a minute. So one of the good features of it having imaging each day is if we look back at time 0, we see nothing. 12 hours, we're just about to start to see that crystal come up there. And if we go through the okay. So one of the good things about having the time course is we can see at time 12 hours, there's a small crystal starting to form. 1 day, you can see it coming up a little more. And it continues to grow. Day 13, day 21. So it pretty much stopped growing between 13 and 12. So if we were to set up a similar tray, we know right around 13 is when we stop waiting and we can harvest those. So up in tools, it certainly gives you a ruler here, but there's under tools there's a ruler you can use here that'll give you a more accurate size of your crystal. Oops. Like so, and then you can, you can take save that entire image there for your presentation or grant or whatever. Okay, so once you have some marked as interesting, we can use the RockImager computer and identify the interesting drops and image them how we want. All right, now that we've scored a plate, we're going to image part of the plate in a little more detail. So if we've gone through and marked some drops as interesting, we can go to Canvas, and then we can go to the score view here, and it's going to show all the drops that I just marked as interesting. So now what we want to do is image this plate in Imager default. You always want to do that, as well as UV high definition to get a picture. So in this case, we would have what are potential crystals, and we want to see them in UV as well as visible to decide whether the protein are these larger crystals, hopefully, or these small spiked things. The way we do that is to set up the imaging ones and then go over to the RockImager computer and use that to image just the interesting drops. Okay, so now we're going to image just interesting drops using visible and UV high definition. Typically, you only want to use the UV high definition to image individual wells. It's extremely inefficient to image the entire plate with UV high def every time. It takes about an hour per plate and uses up a lot of storage, and really doesn't help you unless you think there's something in that well already. So what you'll do on the RockImager program, go up to Plates, go to the Search, and you can search by either your plate ID if you know the number, or you can just sort these in order, or you can look for your username. So you'll find the plate that you wanted, right-click on it, and then go down to Image Interesting Drops Using, and click the options that you want. There's several UV options of different exposures. In the next segment, I'll show you how to image completely manually so you can adjust the exposure and fine-tune it. So you'll do that, hit OK. It'll bring the plate up and only image the wells that you identified in RockImager that you wanted it to. That will save time and storage space. In this section, we're going to learn how to use the RI1000 in complete manual mode. So basically, rather than have it do an automatic imaging, you can simply use it as basically a large microscope. So if you find a drop you're really interested in and you want to take some nice pictures, this is how we do it. You'll go to Plates, Search, find the plate that you want. For that, you want to go up to Scheduling and set it to manual mode. You're better off leaving it at Resume automatically in 10 minutes in case you forget to set it back. That way you don't disable it for the rest of the day if no one sets it back. I'm just going to switch it to manually right now, though. That'll allow you to use it. Okay, so that's up on the UV imager now. So if I go up to Imager here, make sure we're on Imager Control Visible UV. First thing you want to do is turn on the camera. So here, camera control on. Now, the way it's set up is it knows the plate definition, it knows the limits, so you can't crash the machine as long as you have the right plate definition in there. So don't be afraid of moving things around. So if we turn on live image, now the image is on, and this is well A1, drop 1, and there's only one drop in the hanging experiment. So first thing you want to do is use this auto exposure button here. That'll set the exposure, time, and the auto button here is really probably the most commonly used button you're going to use. So hit auto, Gets the exposure a bit better. And you can see it's out of focus. So let's go to a well that I really wanted to look at, which was C5. So you can navigate wells either with the arrows, if you have this set to well, so A2, A3, or you can just type in the well, and it'll go down to that one. That's a little off center here, so we can either move the position of the deck. Oops. We take it off of well and put it on fast. That'll move it. You can also use medium. To find the drop. An easier way also is to simply double click where you want to center, and that'll center it. Okay, let's see, every time you move it, you want to hit auto again to get the exposure right. Now let's see if we can just get this drop in focus. So these two buttons here are the Z direction, which will control the focus. When you click on that, it should be on slow. And you can see I'm getting out of focus. Get back in. So I'm going to look right at this guy here. So double click on that. Auto. Try to get that one in a little better focus. And now let's go in with the zoom. So you can either use the arrows to zoom out or to zoom in. The little boxes at the edge of each arrow indicate the minimum and maximum. So if I want to go to minimum zoom, which is 1, of course, it's zoomed all the way out. And if I want to go to maximum zoom, which is 11.3, we hit there. So let's take a look at this guy a little closer. Again, auto is going to get the exposure right. And we'll center on that. Try to get the focus just a little bit better. And you can also adjust the condenser if you like. There we go. And it also has a polarizer in it. So you can see the different, how it looks under different polarization conditions. Once you have a picture you like, very easy, you go up here, save image, and that's that. If you're working, save images and creating a presentation or transferring them, you probably want to turn off the camera occasionally so you don't have excessive light on your experiment. Now let's see how to do a UV exposure. So again, I'm going to try to get a UV picture of this particular crystal here. So we'll switch over to the UV tab here. Now in this case, there's two, in order to get the UV image, there's two buttons. There's illumination and camera control live image. You need to turn both of those on in order to get UV to illuminate and to be able to see it. Since it's a UV image, which may or may not be damaging to your protein, you want to be mindful of how long you leave that illumination on. One big difference between the visible and the UV is the zoom objectives. So in visible, it's a sliding gradient from 1 to 11.3, and you can get anywhere in between, and you can even select particular values. We'll go there. In UV, you have 3 choices, 2.5, 5, and 7. So the best way to do this, if you want to look at a picture of something at 7 in UV, is to go to visible, set the zoom to 7, center what you want to look at, and get it in focus as good as you can. The XYZ coordinates should transfer over to the UV imaging. You may have to refocus it a little bit because they are 2 different cameras. And it's a good idea to take an image or save an image in visible if you're going to go to UV, and then you can do an overlay shot in Photoshop where you fade one out and really compare them. And that'll compare the other crystals as well as determine what these things are. So now if we go over to UV, I am going to turn on the illumination and turn on the live image. Now in this case, there's no auto button. You have to manually put in the exposure. So we're going to go to that zoom 7. Since the exposure time's a lot longer with UV, here it's 625 milliseconds. That's how much time it takes in between each picture. So if we go all the way up to 1500 milliseconds, that's a second and a half. So you have to wait a second and a half for it to take that new image. An easy mistake is to set the exposure very high and then keep changing things while it hasn't caught up with you yet. So there's that crystal that we were interested in. It's just a little bit out of focus. Ooh. And I had made that mistake there, where I didn't wait the 2 seconds between each focus level. Yeah. I'm going to go back to, you're going to be cutting a lot of this out. Is that running?
Yeah.
All right. So now we can see our crystal of interest at 7 zoom. It's just slightly out of focus. So what I want to do is adjust the Z to get it a little bit better focus. And we've got to remember to wait 1.5 seconds in between each image. So change the focus there. New image came up. It's a little blurrier. So I'm going to go 2 clicks up. One more click up. Okay, so that's pretty good in focus. Typically the UV is a diagnostic tool to help you determine if it's protein or salt. However, making a nice picture to show your PI or grant or whatever can't hurt. So then we'd save that one too. And then you'll have a picture of, at the same, basically the same day, of UV and visible at the same zoom that you can compare with. Okay, so in addition to viewing your results at the workstation, you can look at your results remotely, either from your lab or from home. So if we go to a program called RockImager Web, which is here, at this is the URL, which is also on the screen. You log in with your same credentials as you do for RockImager on this computer. If it gives you an error about a security SSL thing, just either add the site to your list, and if you can't figure out how to do it, call the help desk. It's an issue we're trying to solve. So basically, this will give you the same layout and the same information, but in a different format as on the RockImager itself. Your project hierarchy should be about the same. Okay, so again, it'll show you here, it'll automatically go into the navigator here for your different time points and the different imaging schedules that it did. So here you can see the results of what we did earlier when we imaged those interesting drops. So these are invisible. And we also did them in UV. And you can see that here. So again, invisible. Double click on it. There it is. There's your ruler. Your tools are up here. You can score them. So crystals, will score that as 9. Your crystals come up down here. On RockImager Web, it indicates interesting as a little red star versus the eye. And if you go into tools, you can do drop location from here as well. And adjust your drop location from home, and that should transfer to the database for the next round of imaging. Also in imaging tools, there's a histogram. You can adjust your brightness, and you can zoom in and zoom out to take pictures. So again, that's the website there, and you can access it remotely, so you can see how your experiment's going.